This rainbow embroidery kit is suitable for beginners to hand embroidery as it has only a few simple stitches and the entire project can be completed in one afternoon. A chain stitch is used to applique felt arches to the fabric, a running stitch is used to decorate the outside of the rainbow, and a fringe stitch or turkey work stitch is used to create the clouds. To make the project easier, you could also attach the felt arches using a simple running stitch. The kit supplies include your cotton fabric, a 4-inch embroidery hoop, your embroidery needle, your embroidery floss, and your 3 felt arches. You'll also need a pair of embroidery scissors, snips, or sharp scissors. Your kit will come with the fabric already placed inside your embroidery hoop. But for future reference, I'll explain how to place the fabric in the hoop. Unscrew the clamp, then place the smaller hoop underneath your fabric. Place the larger hoop on top and start to tighten. Then pull the fabric taut and tighten again. Make sure that the grain line of your fabric isn't distorted or wavy. Trim around your hoop using pinking shears or scissors. Leave about 1.5 inches. Lay out your felt pieces where you would like on the circle. Make sure you are leaving enough room for the navy running stitch around the edge of the rainbow and enough space for the fringe stitch below. In the example, the bottom of the arches is 1.5 inches above the bottom center and 2.5 inches below the top center. The pink arch has the most stability to its shape, so it's best to lay out this piece first and lay the other arches around it, leaving a small gap between each. I've decided to shift everything down slightly to make sure I have enough room for that running stitch. Once you're happy with the placement, remove all pieces but the pink arch. You can use pins or this water-soluble fabric glue to temporarily hold the pink felt in place, or simply hold it in place as you stitch. Embroidery floss is made from cotton threads that come as 6 strands that are twisted around each other. Usually you want to separate out a certain amount of strands to use. For this project, we'll be using 3 strands. So separate out 3 strands, like this. With my right hand, I am untwisting and separating the floss, and with my left hand, I am detangling the strands. When you thread your needle, make sure all 3 strands go through the eye of the needle. It can help to trim off this end first, or to dampen it slightly. To tie a knot, I just wrap the thread around my finger like this. Tying 1 or 2 knots helps secure the stitching so your thread doesn't pass all the way through the fabric. Take your needle and have it come out at the bottom of the right side of that arch. Now you're going to put the needle back through towards the back, right next to where your first stitch came out. This time you don't want to pull the thread all the way through. Instead, you're going to grab onto a loop of the thread and hold it just above where you are going to stitch. Now pass the needle about 1/4 inch from where you started, back towards the front. It's always trickiest to do the first stitch because the felt hasn't been secured to the fabric yet. Pass your needle through that loop . and pull your stitch not too tight because we're going to have to go back into this stitch. Now go in right next to where your thread just came out, inside that loop, and again you're going to hold onto this thread so that you have another loop. Hold it above where you want your stitch to come out next, and come out one stitch length later. You want these stitches to be even. Now pull that stitch taut, but again, you don't want to pull it too tight. One more time, I'm just going to go back into that loop, right next to where I just came out. I'm going to grab this loop of thread before it gets pulled all the way through, hold it up above where my next stitch will come out, and go ahead and pull that stitch tight. Keep chain stitching all the way around that arch, turning your work as you go, and pulling out that pin when you get close to it. When you get to your last stitch, then you're going to secure by just stitching underneath the bottom of the arch somewhere outside of where your last stitch was. Then flip over to the back side and pass your needle underneath your last stitch you see, and go through that loop to tie a knot. And you can do that one more time to secure it. Then go ahead and trim your threads. Now repeat these steps with your mint arch and 3 strands of the mint embroidery floss. And we'll do it one more time with 3 strands of the goldenrod embroidery floss and the goldenrod arch on the outside. Now using 3 strands of navy embroidery floss, do a running stitch around the outside of the arch. Do 1 small stitch, leave an even smaller gap, and then do another stitch. Try to keep the length of your stitches equal to each other. This is one of the simplest stitches to do, and if you're struggling with the chain stitch, you could use the running stitch instead to attach your arches. Secure your threads just as we did before by passing your needle underneath your last stitch, then going through the loop to tie a knot. Take your 2 yards of white thread and split into 2 lengths of 3 strands each. Thread the needle with 3 strands, pull the needle halfway down the thread, and pull both ends of the thread together. Then knot together. You're now working with floss that is 6 strands. This is a lot easier than trying to thread 6 strands through the tiny eye of the needle. This is what the finished turkey work or fringe stitch looks like, and we're going to do the other side in the exact same way, working from the left side to the right. So we're going to start by doing a big loop, so you'll come out right underneath the rainbow on the left side, and then you're going to go back in just to the right of that stitch, and you don't want to pull it all the way taut. You're going to leave a loop that's a little bit longer than you want your finished fringe to be. After that loop stitch, you're going to do a back stitch. So come out just to the right of where your last loop stitch was, go over and to the left, pull that stitch tight. Now we're going to do another loop stitch. So come out just underneath that last back stitch you did. Stitch one stitch to the right. Leave a nice long loop. And then do a back stitch. So you're going to come out to the right. And then stitch over to the left, back into that hole where the last back stitch started. We're going to repeat this pattern, doing a loop stitch from the left to the right. Nice long loop stitch right there. Then a back stitch going from right to left, starting just to the right of that last loop stitch and ending at the previous back stitch over to the left. Secure your stitching in the usual manner at the back of your work, trim your threads, and then I'm just going to use a needle to sort of comb out this fringe. Then I will trim it down to the length I want. If needed, you can now slightly loosen the hoop and readjust the position of your rainbow so it fits in the hoop nicely. Make sure the clamp is in the center top, as this is used for hanging. Once in position, tighten the clamp again. Now we will finish our embroidery edges. Take one of your leftover embroidery threads, thread 3 strands on your needle, and knot one end. Use a long running stitch to stitch around the edges of the fabric, gathering the edges towards the center of the hoop. Pull gently together and knot to secure once you have stitched all the way around. Now just find a nice place to hang up your completed embroidery project. You are done!